festive season, the calls for hybrid work models and mandatory vaccines are once again in the spotlight. Experts at the Commercial Law Forum, Cliff Decker Hofmeyer, have provided a list of questions and answers that employees and staff need to know for their return to office life. Senior Associate Tamsanqa Mila joins us now for more on this. Tamsanqa, a good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, talk to us about the questions and answers that you provided and also why it was important for you to go about this process.
So coming back from the festive season, especially with the wave that we just recently are ushering ourselves out of, employers need to consider if it is wise for them to usher employees back into the workplace and how they're going to do so. And so with the lessons that we've learned from COVID, it's important for employers to consider what risks they may face as a result of an influx of employees coming into the workplace at once, or ushering them in, for instance, in a hybrid or in a typical type of working arrangement. So the questions and answers consider or look into what an employer may do to achieve a better or less risk in the workplace in terms of COVID exposure.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's the big questions around what employers really can do where vaccine mandates are concerned. I mean, what are you finding there?
So the directive that was issued by the government last year allowed employers to mandate or to set mandatory vaccination policies. However, that can only be done after an employer has, one, done a risk assessment in the workplace to ascertain the number of employees that may need to be vaccinated in order for them to be able to fruitfully participate in the workplace. But it's also quite important that there is a rule, rather there is a directive in the directive, or regulation rather in the directive, that says that an employer must also look at exemptions if employees do not want to be vaccinated. And there are three main categories there. The first category is constitutional grounds. The second category is religious grounds. And the last category is medicine or medical related grounds. So an employer will have to consider all of those and decide then if those people who may, in terms of their assessment, need to be in the workplace, whether they can be exempted regardless of their need.
Yeah. For an employee, though, who's listening to this and says, well, I can fall into that list of exemptions that can be allowed that you're talking about there, but their employer simply does not allow them that freedom. What are the options then that the employee does have?
It's a right. So it depends on what the outcome of that is. If the outcome of that is, for instance, a dismissal, then the natural course of the natural consequence is to challenge that at the CCMA. What the directive does say is the employer must first consult, the employer must allow for people to object, and if they do object, then they must consider those objections in earnest and then give an outcome. And if it depends on what the outcome of those objections is. So it is a right that is provided in the directives. I'm not sure if the employer can say that I don't want to listen for whatever reason. They have to provide that option for employees.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, we're talking now about what is in place according to the last directive that we got from government, which was last year. But we did hear the president just last weekend talking about looking into mandating vaccines across the board in this new year. I mean, what would that then look like, and how does that change policy?
So that's where employers have taken, I think, the step before the government in this case, because until that announcement from the government, it's been the employers who have been at the forefront, based, or rather with the strength of the directive that was issued last year. So if the government makes it law, then I think the powers of the employer to mandate vaccinations in the workplace become more stringent, or become more, they get a bigger punch. What we've seen so far, though, is that the employers, with the strength of the directive, have been able to say, based on our assessment, although the government has not said that this is law, based on our assessment, as well as the directive from the government, in our case, as for instance, employer A, we want to mandate vaccinations. So if the mood from the government would change, I think the work for the employers would be much simpler, much easier.
Yeah. Well, Tamsanqa, thank you so much for speaking to us. An absolute pleasure. Senior Associate there, Tamsanqa Mila with Cliff Decker Hofmeyer. Well, let's check in with Ayanda Dlamini now to see what